Hi, everyone. Michael McGinnis here. Special guest today. Really, here's Candace Wheeler, and she's somebody that's really, frankly, been instrumental in helping me on my own spiritual path. So I really this is a great chance for us to really hear her story. You know, just really what her spiritual path was look like and how that evolved into the wonderful work that she's doing and the ripple effect that that's had on others, something that I can be a great testimonial to. So without further ado, Candace Wheeler.
Oh, wow. You're making me blush. So, you want stories, spiritual stories, right?
How it began, yes.
Okay. How it began.
Once upon a time.
Okay. About a few months before my 4th birthday on Easter morning, I was gifted with a living vision, literally a living vision. Everything dropped away in the room. Everything in the room just went away. And all of a sudden, up out of the floor and up above me were these huge flowers, mammoth, beautiful, energetic. They had sounds, they were colorful. I could smell them. And the lesson in it, that what happened is that as this little kid, I got the energy. I could feel the energy of it. And so what I took away with that is that everything has an energy. It has a frequency. And if I can listen to the frequency, then I can understand the rock. I can understand Michael. I can understand my kids. I can understand anything. So that was the beginning of my spiritual quest to understand source. And obviously in that vision, it felt like I was being given gifts. And so it was then my responsibility to use those gifts. And so my whole life was about learning how to use the gifts that we all have, but I was just made aware of it early on so that I could actually do it. But there were so many things that happened in my life that reinforced that and allowed me to look at life as a service rather than me. But I didn't really get that until maximum security prison. Well, let me say that experience in the prison was probably my life changer. And that was before my near-death experience. So I have several stories here. So I was asked to do my video seminars, which were feedback of videotaping the prisoners, watching themselves on a monitor. So I would be capturing the eyes and their souls. All they could see is their eyes. And they got to see their souls. So I was going into the prison for 2.5 days on the weekend just to do that prison work. But before that happened, I had to be trained to not say certain things and what is appropriate. And I had to sign a paper that said, I don't want guards in there with me. So I had to sign a paper that said, okay, and then you're responsible for your own life if you go in there, because we don't know what those guys have on them, right? So when I walked in that first day, I got frisked and they took me to these 2 mammoth doors that were about this big, and they went bong shut, and it was 2 of them. So I went through the second one, and when the second one closed behind me, I went into absolute terror. I was fine until that time, but oh my gosh, I'm on my own. I'm going to die. What am I going to say? You know, all of the doubt and all of the fear that could ever come up in anybody. So they led me into the room, and I'm in front of the guys. There's 35 men, and they're all like totally closed off, just completely not available, angry, just really not wanting to be there. And I stood in front of the room, and the terror just led my arm to go up in the, this is hypothetically, my arm went up into the air, and I said, God help me, in my mind. And in that moment, all of a sudden, I could see the lives of every single one of those men. I could see this one guy gardening. And I said, are you a gardener? He said, no, but that's my dream. So with each person, I went and I got to experience what it feels like to channel, to my mouth was moving, but it wasn't me. Does that make any sense to you?
Oh, yes, it does. Just from my experience with others who have shared that, so I can appreciate that. I've never experienced it, but by the way, I was really smiling because I didn't know about your prison experience, because I point in my life, I actually had a two-year stint to work in the Florida prison system.
I
And
wondered, it looked like you understood.
oh my God. And so as you
Maximum
talked about the
security?
experience and yes, and as you talked about the experience of just going in, the looks on their faces, you know, I really could echo that. So that just being a side note, but yeah, I really, you know, back to that, it's fascinating. So, you know, it's so easy for others to think that that's not real, right? Because that sounds pretty far out.
I know, it's a good point. It's very true. And I don't care anymore.
You know it's true.
It's my truth. It's my truth, my experience. And if you guys can learn from it, I'm going to tell the story. But you're right. You're right on. Most people. But the people who want to learn, people who want to know about metaphysical experiences, about the fifth dimension, about all this whole new reality that's coming forward on our planet right now. It's exciting, and to be ready for it and to understand it in a new way is what it's all about. So, you know, what that experience did for me is I spent 2.5 days with these guys, and they transformed in front of my eyes. It wasn't me. In fact, I cried for days after it was over because I knew it wasn't me. I knew that it was source. It was a source coming through me. And to get out of the way for 2.5 days, to get my ego to go away and allow it to come forward in a way that served these men. After that was over, I went to a friend's house where it was up in Tehachapi, and I stayed with her for 2.5 days, and all I could do was cry at this. I laid by her swimming pool and I cried for 2.5 days. And what those tears were, and I can still feel it. Those tears were, I'm not here for me, I'm here for anyone who needs me. And I wrote a promise to myself that I would be of service from now on. Sorry about the tears. I guess I'm just realizing that just now that was a turning point for me. And that's what made me get my master's in spiritual psychology and to become a healer and to be confident with the fact that I'm claircognizant and clairsentient. And which is another issue about, I had that my whole life, but I was embarrassed by it. I was embarrassed that people would think I was nuts or stupid or dreamy.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that, is how did you deal with that phase in life? You're obviously at a very different point now. You just mentioned you don't care, you know, you're beyond that. But yet here was this incredible growth, you know, at a point when, you know, people are in their lives, and it's about, you know, their reputation, what they look like, so on and so forth. So how did you deal with some of those feelings initially while you were discovering this incredible gift?
What a great question. How did I? Well, in the first place, I judged myself for being different. Um, I thought I was inadequate because I had these, I didn't know that they were called gifts then, but I had these things that made me do certain things. And it's like, oh, how embarrassing. So when I first started counseling, I did not admit to being intuitive. I did not admit any of this until my clients started saying, how did you know that? Or, wait a minute, I just did this and you just did that. And I started realizing that the feedback that I was getting was that it's okay because these people are being served. So to answer your question, I get that. I think I started accepting my truth. And my truth had to be found moment to moment to moment, especially when dealing with my self-judgment and all the things I was telling myself about myself, the belief system that I had was really messed up. It was opposite. And now when I look back on it, I have two little girls that I brought up believing in those things and understanding those things. And even my granddaughter understands that she's an empath. And it delights me to be able to serve in that way, to facilitate people accepting the truth of them no matter what it is. Does that answer your question?
It's a great answer, and yes, it does. And I appreciate it. Pardon?
It was a great question. I love that.
And it, to build on that, you talk about beliefs, right? Very different to what it before is. What do you believe in? How would you describe your beliefs today?
Oh, I love that question. Oh, that's a big one. My belief is that we are all spirits walking around the planet with bodysuits on, having a human experience. But what other people believe is that we are humans walking around trying to gather spirit. So my belief is we are first a spirit. We came in a spirit. And what happens is that we lose that spirit because of childhood experiences, whether or not mom or dad loved you or didn't, or if it was trauma or not. There's experiences that make a child go, oh, okay, I'm not going to believe in me anymore, or I'm not going to believe that I'm connected. I don't know if you've ever watched babies. They are attracted to light. And whenever I held a baby, they would always look above my head. It was weird, but they are still familiar with light. So I believe, my belief system is that I need to look at everyone who comes to me as a spirit and facilitate them finding that inside of themselves so that they can be comfortable on this really godforsaken planet right now. Because otherwise, it would be scary, wouldn't it? So my belief is that we're all spirits and that we need to feed the spirit, practice the spirit, be with the spirit, and allow the spirit. And I think that's what came through me when I was in the prison.
That's just what I was going to comment on too, is I know for me, like so many, is for what we learn growing up is the search is outside of ourselves, that God is or Allah or some, whatever, is some external thing that I've got to meet and please somehow to be able to get this reward, right? That's not going to be in this life because we're sinners. And so this is a life of doom and gloom, and we sort of live out as you begin to see.
We start our lives as a sinner.
Yes.
We start our life, we are a problem.
Yes. Yep. And I like that, how that my experience, like yours, is it's really difficult. You know, I had quested that. I had no idea what it meant, and that was the real upfront challenge. Is where do I go? So I first went to every religion to sort of figure it out. Well, that one must have the answer. Maybe that one is the answer. And then it was really, no, there's something not right here. Now where do I look? But what I like is how you described it as being something inside of self, that we are that spiritual being. And I like that expression. We're just in a human body suit. Yeah. And to me, that's what you did. You know, that was how I related your experience as you were talking about in prison, as you talked about being in touch. You know, people always say, well, how does it? Does that come from some entity or whatever? And I guess, you know, that's all possible too. But the thing is it's really our own connection to the source that's within. And then it just expresses as we get in touch with it, it's just expressed in a million different ways, or 7.5 billion different ways, right?
Yep. And that's where musicians come from. I've been singing my whole life. One of my first experiences standing in front of hundreds of people and singing Silent Night at 5 years old. I saw the light in all those people. I could see the light. And so I think our job now on the planet is to start seeing people's light instead of their dark. Because we're watching for the dark now. We're watching for the bad stuff.
But we're accustomed to that. And
yes,
maybe there's time, or I want to come back to that, because I really want to zoom in. Is you talked about your gift, your uniqueness, these skills, abilities, whatever would be the right word to describe these gifts you have. Can you be a little bit more descriptive in terms of what that gift is, and what do you do? What is it that you do now with clients?
Well, I would say that my intuition comes up with questions that make the client go, ooh. I have to think about that. And then they go in and they look at it. So my skill, you know, and I hate to say mine because everybody has them. It's just a matter of developing them and actually it's a matter of being more confident with it and trusting them. So how I use it now is, well, of course I do readings, and a reading, that's simple. It's just letting the information come forward.
Well, so describe that, the people who maybe have heard that expression before, but don't understand what you're doing or how it's working. Can you attempt to try to describe that?
Wow. I don't know. I've never described it before. All I know is that I'm either given a picture or I see words on my forehead, or I hear a question. It comes in all kinds of forms. And the key is to pay attention to it. So whatever comes forward, even though I don't understand it yet, what I do is I end up asking a question about that. Like, I'm seeing this. What does that mean to you? And they go and they start crying because it's bringing up old stuff. But I think I did this with you, Michael. The interactive, inner guided imagery that I I still do, but you might remember it. It allows an asset. Let's take a example for anger. And you allow a picture to come up in the client's mind for anger. And you get them to trust, you get them relaxed, you get them to trust that whatever comes up. And so they're seeing this image, like whether it's a fireball or a person, or it doesn't matter what it is. But they're building a relationship with it. They're asking questions, they're telling it what it feels like. And it's this intuitive dance between me and them and the aspect. And it has to be intuitive because you're in the unknown. You're in this this wave of who knows what's going to come up here. That I actually have them become the aspect so that they can be the anger and look out at them present self. And this takes a lot of intuition. It takes trusting. But like I just had a client this morning that she had the inner process last week. She claims she's totally healed of that particular thing. It was her own self-judgment of not being enough, which is a common thing. But that's just one example. Does that help you?
Oh, it does. And if I can help on that, because I can speak to it from the client perspective.
Oh, cool.
Right? Because because that was the work. So needless to say, like so many, myself in a troubled time, dark time, struggling to try to figure things, relationship challenges. So things that probably anybody else could probably say, oh yeah, me too. But the difference was, I reached out to Candace and I said, I could use some help on this. And again, that's to me, that first act of courage I really push people to make is be willing to sort of just reach out, and accept that you have a challenge. But in the cases if you recall, I happened to create this whole document from all of our sessions and made notes from everything. And darn, I know I have it. I could bring it up easily to see it. But in essence, it was just that. We'd start the session and you'd get me talking, and it was primarily about what's going on. And it wasn't long in there that you would say, wow, so you were feeling this and things, yes. So I could empathize, yeah, clear that you could empathize with me, make that relate. And then you would ask, so if you were to come up with an image of this, what sort of image comes to mind? And I can remember the first couple of times, I really can. And this is years ago. What? What do you mean an
Are
image?
You kidding me?
Yes, it's like nothing was coming to my mind there, But then now think about, just step back, take a deep breath, and I forgot the steps to get there, but slowly but surely there was. And then, okay, explain that, where did that come up? And I can remember today, there's one I'll never forget. And because it was so obscure and because the image was an oscilloscope. I said, what the hell? I'm not a scientist. I'm amazed I even knew that word, oscilloscope. I haven't heard that in years. Why is it? And you said, well, build on it, what do you see in this oscilloscope? Well, I see, the pattern, I see it. I'm watching right now this pattern, on the oscilloscope going over there. And what do you see as the pattern, you would say, and inquire. Now, this is, after we had met and I was getting more comfortable with it. But initially it was, just building up. Okay, I tried that. But clearly, obviously, I came to that conclusion that, wow, this was really helpful. You had me end up talking to myself, as the other entity, whatever, at times it was a sword, and that was resembling the anger that I had, and so some of them they were pretty easy to make a fit. Other things like oscilloscope, it was different. But lo and behold, and I can remember with the oscilloscope is that was really key, is because one of the key uses of those kinds of oscilloscopes, at least that I was familiar with, was EKGs, right? And it was seeing it and it would start flatlining, which could have been me. And that's where I've got to get my own levels of stress in order, which was one of the key outcomes, from that particular session. But that was from a client perspective. As I built that trust and connection with you, that was awesome. The other tool that you used with me and you could speak to is the tarot reading, where you had the cards. Am I saying it right? Is that it, Tara?
Yes.
And here was this stack of cards, and I had since seen seen them in person. I think we were doing it all via Skype at that time, virtually. I've seen them, and but you put the cards all down on a surface and then actually had the camera focusing down on these. And it was just a random selection of cards. And my God, if that didn't connect the dots for me, it fit. It was so custom. And I remember writing it down. You had an observation sheet or something that I would fill out.
Yeah.
Following that and relate to the readings. And it was just like, oh my God, this stuff is real. It works. I think, which then helped me to develop that sense of trust in the process and you that really then allowed to go on, with sessions with you that really uncovered some kernels of challenges, of issues, of elements that were really pertinent for me at the time.
Thank you. That's the most amazing feedback I've ever heard. And I love doing the readings so much. You know why? It takes no thought. It's effortless for me. And wow. I get high. I can feel myself starting out and I get higher and higher and higher. And by the time I'm done, I'm like on the ceiling. And I love doing them. Oh, there's your notes.
There it is. Yes.
Wow.
And so this is an example, and here she is. In fact, and so this ended up to be the purpose of the discussion. And I can remember, I would capture notes. We'd go through this and she would give me the essence of the reading. So there was a card. So this case, it was the knower card. And then we talk about that and what it meant over here. And what was absolutely amazing, and you see as I'm going through, how do you wish to appear, your thinking, your feeling, your intuition, your present belief system. And in any case here, as you can see, I was actively taking a lot of notes because this was incredibly useful for me too. This is one element of it. Then following our sessions, I just would take the time to write my own notes.
You saw.
Yes, and so this is, there's an example, from one of our sessions. So here's one of our situation, and we talked about it, and I'd make notes of it.
Amazing.
But then in the visualization, but it's good because I'm able to describe your work. So here is really that sword and the axe, and relate sword as it came out through discussion. These were my notes. Was my fear of conflict, seeing it before as violent, hurtful, and producing negative outcomes, and related to the experience I had growing up, which was a lot of trauma and abuse, and the act, so on and so forth. And you can see here was another session where it was a fence around me, and I would just go out to Google Images and find something that really would help for me. And so I captured these notes, but in essence, that's me as a client. The help that it provided me was getting this image, the challenge that you gave me, and then really our discussion followed through with helping really to understand why these were. And I think here's, as I merged with the axe, of which something you had mentioned to do, is like, what? What do you mean merge with an axe?
It's not everything. The axe now.
Right? Yes. But then I did, and I got into that. You helped me into that. I realized I could use this along with the sword to increase my personal power, to detach myself from the negative beliefs. And this was the realizations that I myself had with you being the coach and guide here on the side. So my comment to others is I support this. I benefited from this. And these are just a couple real examples, of the kind of benefit to the work that Candace does and is talking about.
I'm blown away. I had no idea you were doing all that. And what was brought up for me is that one reading is equivalent to 3 sessions, 3 one-hour sessions, don't you think?
Oh, more like, I'd say 10, but that's,
okay. Yes. And that's why I want to do more readings now. Because it's, if people would understand that we can just hone right into the reality of the person.
Well, what I liked about this too is, I did the traditional counseling therapist, which was helpful from me from a psychological perspective to understand what's going on, and
Yeah.
to start doing some basic work, affirmations and self-esteem to realize what had happened. So that was help. But, really where I found you as a resource, and I describe it today, is that you became, yeah, I called you my spiritual coach. So I had the therapist that helped me with some of the psychological part and the physical plane, me really dealing with some of the psychology and the effect of it that it had on me. But then your work really helped me to evolve. And that's why I'd say one of our sessions was probably the equivalent of 5 of my counselor sessions, not to diminish the therapist. It was needed work and effort. But, the depth of what we were talking about really helped me to connect the dots much more so than I was able to in other types of therapies or counseling.
Beautiful. Thank you again. And thank you for your creativity and your ability to organize your thoughts and come forward or come up with answers for yourself. I mean, a lot of that work you did yourself, you know?
Well, and and so I'll go to your comment. This is now, as I've worked on myself, evolved spiritually, I'd say that these are now the gifts that I'm aware of for myself. And that's why I love this work, is being able to help support, as people talk about the work that you've done. I've experienced a lot of these, and I can be that person in the hot seat, and talk about if I experienced, add credence to these elements, because so much of what I experienced on my spiritual journey was not in any recipe book I had heard of beforehand. Would have been sort of crazy to talk about beforehand. Yeah. But and that's, so I appreciate it. But like you too, is that I know for me too is that the work for me is as I get into this high energy, which I'm in right now because I love what I'm doing. That's me connected to source, right? And that's what that is. And so that's what I had to learn how to do it. So this is frankly me, like you being connected and doing your work. This is me being my work, the ability to be able to just help connect, be an inspiration, support, and really give things from a layman's perspective, because I can so much relate to people and the negative experiences that so many people have gone through.
That is so valuable. Extremely valuable. Bless your heart. And
well, thank you
for the feedback, because I've never heard it like that. And it opens some windows and doors for me.
Yeah, here you do it as this every day with clients. And so good. I'm glad I added some value to it. The other thing that I wanted to go back to is just this, you use this expression, near-death experience. God, does that mean so much to me? It was such a, the connection with near-death experience is so helpful in my life. But tell me about your experience and what came of that.
Well, if I could start at the end, what came of it is that I got to come back knowing who I really am. And that's light and love. So what happened is I was doing some healing work. And by the way, there was some angelic stuff going on too. But the healing work that I did was channeling for about 24 hours. And that fried my heart. I didn't know that that's what, I didn't know how to protect myself. So what happened is that I was actually in my doctor's office complaining about my heart doing these weird things about a week after I had done this healing. And we did it. I got on the, whatever you call it, and the EKG and and I started into a cardiac arrest. He puts me in a wheelchair and he literally runs me down the street into the hospital next door. And I'm in emergency. And the next thing I know, I'm in cardiac intensive care, which is like a glass bubble. Everybody can see you, and I'm hooked up like crazy with all these machines, and I can hear my heart. And it stopped several times and did an axis reversal, and I can hear it. And I'm, that's kind of hard to deal with. So like the third day, I started into something was happening. I don't know what it was, but the pain was really bad. And everybody started running in, looking worried, intense. That scared me, watching everybody, because before that, they've been really calm, very soothing, and now they're rushing around and they're putting stuff all over me and they're connecting me to stuff. And there was a moment when the pain, it wasn't the pain, it was the fear, the terror. And I heard myself, and I said this out loud, "Thy will be done." Because I knew that it was bigger than me, and something had to be done. So I said it out loud, and everybody kind of stopped and looked at me, but I was too busy. And in that moment, my body raised above me, or my spirit did. And all around me were these little spheres of sparkling white light. They were like doing this, they were pulsating. And one came close to me and was like right in my face, if I had a face, but in my consciousness. And I went into it, or it took me in. I don't know what you would call it. And the next thing I know, it's this field of light. And I kept spreading and spreading and spreading and spreading. I was the field, and I was limitless. I was unlimited. I was eternal, huge. And the love was, I miss it. I miss the depth and the strength of that love. And what was interesting is that I was loving this. Just let me hang out here as eternal love and light. I'm okay. I'll stay here. This is where I want to be. And the next thing I know, I'm being shown all the fear of my lifetime. Every moment that I was fearful, which was so many of them. I came in fear because my mom was pregnant during World War II. And Dad was on front lines. So I came in with fear and multiplied it over and over and over and over and over again. So I saw that review, I'm hanging out, and the next thing I know, I'm back in my body. Pissed off. I'm sorry. I was angry. It's like, okay, I want to be back there. But what was interesting is that the pain was still there, but the fear was gone. And what I would share about that experience is that we're all eternal light and eternal love. And that's all it is. And if we can, in moments of fear, come back to the moment, be in the moment, look at what we're doing in the moment, and come back to that light and that love, and ask yourself, what are you telling yourself? It's against what you really are. What you really are is eternal light and eternal love. And that is why we're on the planet now. And that's why people like yourself are spreading the word, so that more and more people can come to an understanding or a belief that that's what we are. Always. We come from that, we go back to that. I can't wait. So there's that.
Wow, thank you very much for sharing. In fact, all your sharing too, and you mentioned earlier right up front the sharing with the tears and everything. I really appreciate you being you, because it was just amazing to sit and hear the stories and hear the experience as all of these stories were for me really are powerful. And that's why storytelling is so powerful really today still, just like when we were kids, right? Except now the stories are these stories such as yours that really can help people reconsider things, rethink things, and maybe even,
Open up their point of view.
Perfect. So well said. And I can't think of a better time than the pandemic right now here too. And so just, here's something like a pandemic. So what's your read on that? I'll share mine afterwards. What's your read on this pandemic?
I think it's a just cleaning up. Just meaning the planet knows that it's ill and is working very, very hard to clean it up. So it's a karmic cleanup. That's what I'm getting. And those of us who have a consciousness of awareness that we're not on the planet to be dark and die, we're on the planet to bring light and love. And we can focus on that. And those are the people who will survive. And that's not putting down the people who have not or have gotten ill, not at all. But I really believe that this planet is a living entity. It's a body. Our planet is a living body that has fires going on to clean up this little area, and has a pandemic going on to clean up this area, and we have a tornado going on over here. It's an overall cleanup, and I'm trusting it. And I'm also trusting my part of it, because part of what I'm doing is, most of my clients are not afraid. In fact, one got it. One actually got it, and she was not deterred at all. She was totally okay because she knows who she really is.
Wow.
So what's your hit?
I'm so glad you shared that too. To me, it really complements what you said, just maybe different words. I process things, and it's my quiet time, and writing for me helps. It's a way that helps me to quiet the mind and really sort of write out things. And it was really interesting because as I wrote down there, this is nothing less than a global wake-up call to all of humanity.
Yeah.
And this is, we've gone through the 2x2 approach and some 2x4 approach, which represents sort of the hit on the heads we get, sort of just try to nudge us on the way. And okay, there's now some issues deeper rooted. We got to get the 2x12 out now and think about it. And as I look at it, as much as there is the pain and suffering, which again, to me, in my view, I said it before, has a purpose in life, as I discovered it is to be a stimulus to growth. And so here we are at a point in time where we have something in common with every other human being in the world, and that's the pandemic.
Amen.
It's there, it's present, it's affecting everyone equally, and it's there. And so we can now have this common terminology to really talk through. But yet, the other part of it really related to sort of an interesting post I was writing, and just really starting to it was, here we are in 2020. And the vantage point that I had is that, 2020 in itself is a word we use to describe great vision. Our ideal vision is 2020, right?
Right.
And so all of a sudden, it became a play on that. But then I said, isn't it interesting that people are talking about something getting out of 2020 and this and that? And I said, no, you know what? My view is that as the global wake up call to humanity, but we've been gifted with 2020 sight. So all of us have had various sights based on our prejudices and biases. And now for the first time, we can really look out and see the world for what it is. We can see the good, bad, and the ugly. And hence the protests, helping to point out, very negative aspects of humanity. The elections, pointing out very negative aspects to leadership and so on and so. And there, as well as, you know, just the health crisis and how we're dealing with it. And here we are all trying to deal with it individually or locally. When it's a global problem, we really need to start erasing the borders and start working collaboratively as a globe, as a world on this. Imagine what could have been accomplished earlier. And I think all of the merits now of the vaccine and things are because it was approached from a global level. And that to me was really, I think, is it's a wake up call for us. And there's going to be multitude of benefits from this that we have just beginning to recognize. You know, one such example is just from a work structure. So many people, the companies who had wanted nothing to do with people working at home, not trusting their employees or whatever, were forced to. They were forced to make that work. Now, all of a sudden, you know, yes, there's a good percentage you want to get back that miss that social connection, but more and more every day is as I meet and connect with people, I don't want to go back. 2.5 hour commute time? No way.
Hey.
You know, and now today, 5 o'clock, I'm done, you know, and whereas before that was just the beginning of my commute, and then 6:30 or 7 o'clock I get home and have to make the dinner and so on and so forth. And, you know, that's just one of many, you know, elements that I think we'll see as benefits from this. Plus, hopefully, you know, the realization is we're seeing now, and I think the elections taught us that is we have to come together. We've got to stop this competitive, macho kind of mindset between parties and people and nations and countries. And we've got to go back to the Stephen Covey kind of way of being able to really work together and collaborate to it. And, you know, I'm not sure. I'm hoping the 2x12 works. If not, you know, we'll probably get a 2x14. And, you know, as people begin to see that pattern, that'll, as you mentioned, begin to start escalating, I believe. You know, people more developing and more beginning to make changes, beginning with themselves.
That's an incredible perspective. And I agree 100% with every single word you said. That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. You know, many of my clients are international. And it was fascinating to hear all of the different perspectives of the pandemic. Like in Dubai, they have a king, they don't have a president, it's a king. And he laid the rules down and he said, you quarantine for X amount of hours, and if you're caught on the street, it's $1,500. And they're okay now. But look at us, not having done a thing. So then getting the feedback from the person on the East Coast who got COVID and shrugged her shoulders and said, well, now I'm not going to get it again. And continued going on. And she had to quarantine, of course. But it was just fascinating to hear like the East Coast versus Alabama and Spain versus Dubai. And I work with someone who's in Austria, Vienna. And to hear her point of view was like none other. I can't even describe it. It was just, my point is that every country, every person has a different experience of it. And that conglomerate of thought, and that's all it is just thought. We got to get past the thought and come to the feeling of being grateful to be whole and healed. That's the next step. We've got to start being grateful for our planet, being grateful for our people, being grateful for being whole, and and constantly reminding ourselves to be grateful, because it's that opens the heart, and that's what's needed right now. It's needed. Everyone is challenged right now. Their hearts are closed because of fear. But I think our next step is opening our hearts. And that would bring about exactly what you were saying, is we have to come together. But we're not going to come together unless our hearts are open. So
yep.
that would be the next step. And that's what I'm encouraging with my kids and my clients, as much as I can.
Well said. Well, this has been an incredible session. We could probably go on for hours on this and cover so many topics, but to bring this one to a conclusion, any parting words on your part to those out there who may listen in and they're thinking, aspiring maybe to this whole concept of spiritual path or growth or things, any parting words or thoughts for them?
I think what I hear myself constantly say is believe in your truth. Listen to your truth, believe in it, and take action on it. That would be, I think that's what I say all the time. So I say it again here.
It's beautiful words. And I'd emphasize the word your truths, because a lot of that challenge up front, as I found for myself, is realized I was so conditioned with a lot of society and others' truths, not my own. And that took a lot of work to sort of just learn to put their truths aside, to let them know that was okay. You give yourself permission to do that, to start discovering, because you're right. This is with that truth, then pursuing it is really what's important for each of us.
That's right. And you can depend on that truth if you practice trusting it.
Yes.
And you get used to it.
Perfect. Well, we'll hang on for a couple minutes after the closing out, but Candace, I just wanted to say, before we do close out, is just thank you very, very much for your time. What a wonderful gift it was to really connect with you again and hear you share your story.
And you were a marvelous conversationalist with me. I loved your questions. I love your depth. And I really love what you've done with your life. I'm in great admiration. You're one of the clients that I can say, look what he did.
That's right. And it's all fitting together because of the work you did with me. That's how it all works, right? It's the saying there, must do it myself, but I cannot do it alone. That's
the ripple effect that you talk about.
Spot on. Yes. That is.
It was
very good. Until next time.
Bye.